Well, good morning. Welcome. It is great to be here in person, right? Amen. And to see you in person. It's good to get back to the old normal, right? And maybe kick that so-called new normal to the trash can where it belongs. What do you say? Amen. All right. We are, I think, the first of Ohio's 24 electric co-ops to hold an in-person annual meeting since 2019. So it's really good to get back in person here, and it's really part of the whole electric cooperative way of member ownership. Well, so before we get started, I'd like to make a few introductions. Anyone found Bob? Here he is. All right, okay. Yep. He just got elected. Well, maybe we'll see. Maybe. So starting with your board of directors, we've got Roger Rank, Bob Barnt, Kathy Brake, Vice President Jim Wiekert, President Larry Vandemark, Attorney Courtney Burton, Secretary Treasurer Randy Heinel, Gary Knapke, and Steve Bauer. And we may have some employees here in the auditorium, or they might, I don't see them actually yet, but Paul Rogers and Terry Gerlach and Kevin Schmidt are typically here, but they're not here yet. Speak up. They said they can't hear me? Okay. Is that good? Do I have to go through all the introductions again, or? So, okay. Good morning. Welcome. It's great. Oh, you got that. All right. Any retirees here? Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean Midwest Electric retirees. So pretty much we don't want to go through the whole room of retirees here. So okay, well, so some special guests here today. We have State Representative Craig Riedel and
you notice, I think most of us already know what the answer is going to be, but when you walk in and you're looking for the restroom and the women's restroom is, where's it located at? When you're standing looking at it, it's usually located to the right. Think about it. It's usually located to the right. Purpose is women are always right. Okay? I already knew that. I think most of us already knew that, but that just confirms that anyways. So anyways, I'd like to call this to order, this 84th annual meeting of Midwest Electric. The credential committees have reported that over 100 members are present in person or by ballot, and therefore we do have a quorum to have continue with our meeting. At this time, I'd like to invite Jim Wiekert up here for the invocation.
Please bow your heads for a moment of prayer. Here in your presence, Lord, we praise and glorify your name. We are thankful again to be reunited with in-person human connection through this annual meeting of the members. May the fellowship and community we experience here together not be taken for granted, and may it be pleasing in your eyes. Lord, we are thankful for technology and medical science to both empower our lives and also heal the ill, save lives, and transport us to a place of normalcy with each other. Help us to never take for granted each other and the human connection that is the heart of our co-op community. Lord, as we examine our co-op history, we see the foundations of our success and look forward to our bright future to come. When we reflect upon our own history and we separate all the things that have and can distract us from your love and love of our fellow man, it is easy to place in perspective the fact that we are helpless without you. We humbly ask for your blessings upon our co-op employees, CEO, and board of directors to serve our membership. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
At this time, I would like to recognize, would all of our veterans please stand? with less than 1.3% rejection ratio. Those poles that were rejected will be replaced with new ones. We rebuilt 20 miles of single-phase line in the Noble Kossuth substation area. For the past 4 years, we've been in a shared services arrangement with Paulding Putman and Electric Cooperative, where we share a couple of employees. This has provided good service to the members and substantial savings, and we are continuing to share those services with Paulding. I want to thank you to those of you that are involved in the grassroots legislative effort and the co-op owners for political action. When we speak with one unified voice, we stand a much better chance of fighting our challenges and affecting legislative decisions that impact our cooperative and its members. As we see the political atmosphere changing, and possibly some potential changes that could affect the rural electric cooperatives in a negative way, your board of directors would encourage those members that are not involved to get involved by donating through their monthly bill. We must keep a strong force in Washington to make sure that Midwest Electric can continue to offer their members reliable and reasonable electricity. We have a booth out in the called Member Promotions in the cafeteria today, where you can sign up for the co-op owners for political action for just $25 per year, and we'll give you some efficient LED light bulbs as incentive. And for those that are home watching, please contact Midwest Electric to get involved in that. And again, I thank you for your participation. It's very important that we keep a strong role in this political atmosphere that we see coming here. Last and not least, I want to especially thank our employees for an outstanding job they have done to stay healthy and continue to provide exceptional service despite the challenges of the pandemic. Our employees demonstrated innovation, commitment, and dedication in face of unknowns that seem to change day by day. Again, let's give our employees a round of appreciation for a job they've done. Oh, okay. All right. And I was just informed, I jumped ahead here. I forgot to do the minutes on that. And that's important that we do that. So anyway, that was my last report on that end. So the minutes of the 2020 were distributed to you out in the handout that you received. I guess, is there any additions or any questions on the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes. All right, I have a motion back here. Is there a second? All right, there's a second. All in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Thank you for reminding me to do that. So, anyways, at this time, I would like to welcome you and welcome our next speaker, Pat O'Loughlin, to come up. He's CEO of Buckeye Power and Ohio Electric Cooperatives.
Thanks, Larry. And good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm Pat O'Loughlin. I'm the president and CEO of Buckeye Power, the electric power supply provider to all of Ohio's cooperatives, and the president of our trade association, Ohio's Electric Cooperatives. And we supply electricity to all 25 co-ops that operate in Ohio, about 1 million people across the state. We do it with a diverse mix of fuel supply, from coal to natural gas to a mix of renewable energy. And we work really hard to make sure that we keep our costs low and reliability high. I just want to take a couple minutes to highlight a few of the accomplishments the last year of Ohio's cooperatives, including Midwest Electric. As Larry told you earlier, we've maintained flat electric rates across the state for about 10 years, a little over 10 years now, for the power supply portion of your bill. And last year, we faced a lot of challenges. I think everybody here wanted to use electricity every day last year, no matter what was going on with COVID. And our co-ops did an exceptional job of providing service through different challenges. In fact, we set a record high for member satisfaction across the state this past year. We continue to train a new generation of line workers at what I believe to be the finest line worker training program anywhere in the country right now. We continue to have involvement in improvements to the high voltage electric system. That's one of the things that challenges us a little bit. We rely on the high voltage electric grid of AEP and Dayton Power and Light and others to deliver power to your co-op. And maintaining the reliability and the level of investment that your co-op does in local facilities is sometimes a challenge, but we continue to work with those folks on that. And finally, we are maintaining a diverse set of generation resources so that we can provide reliable and affordable electricity. And there's some winds that are pushing against us being able to use the diverse set of fuels that we've always used. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Matt asked me to spend a couple minutes talking about what happened in Texas this last winter. We had what we now call a polar vortex. We used to call it a really cold day. And you can see this map here that shows through the middle part of the country and down into Texas. We did experience relatively cold temperatures and over into all the way through the middle part of the country. But you can see, it's hard to see on this map, but one morning that week in Memphis it was 4 degrees, but just a couple hundred miles away in Atlanta it was 40 degrees. So it wasn't everywhere, but it was pretty widespread. Just a couple of things to highlight about what happened during that period. It was a record cold 72-hour period in Dallas, Texas. You'll hear that a lot. What you won't hear is it gets that cold in Texas about every 25 years. I went and looked it up myself. About every 25 years or so, they have a series of really cold days like they had. The grid operator in Texas, called ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, predicted that they would have their highest electric demand ever during that week. Unfortunately, about half of the power generation they have in Texas was not operating during that week for a variety of reasons, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So they had their highest load ever, and only about half of their power generation was operating during the week. In Texas, they have very limited interconnections with the rest of the country. They have kind of their own little power grid there in Texas, because they like to do everything their own way in Texas. They have a power market that sets a cap on electricity prices that goes as high as $9 a kilowatt hour. Now, I don't know what that means to you, but you probably pay, I don't know, about 13 cents a kilowatt hour here, Matt, 14 cents?
Well, 10 cents plus a service charge.
Yeah, so, okay, somewhere in that neighborhood. So electricity prices were allowed to go to $9 a kilowatt hour during that period of time, which if you add that up for a typical home, 1 day's worth of electricity at that rate costs about $450. You wonder if anybody ever did the math on that. How many people would pay $450 for 1 day of electricity? I wouldn't, but, and as a result, electric providers realized record high losses. The generation and transmission co-op in Texas, the largest one, Brazos G&T, got a bill from the power supply grid for $2.1 billion for that 1 week of electric supply that they provided. Just to put that in perspective, their bill for the entire year of 2020 was $700 million, so 3 times an entire year's worth of power costs in 1 week. And as a result, they filed bankruptcy along with several other power providers in Texas. And then neighboring states like Arkansas and Oklahoma, up into Kansas, had similar but not as severe results. So this was a fairly widespread problem. Now, a lot of things change and some things really don't. And this is the first rule of electricity supply that you learn is supply needs to equal demand. And if it doesn't, you got a problem. And that's what happened in Texas. They had more demand than they had supply. And so there's only one way to cure that is some of the supply gets shut off. And what they did was they purposefully shut off supply to people on rolling blackouts through 4 days in Texas. You can see, it's kind of hard to see on this chart, but the blue line is how much electricity was supplied, and that little pink line is how much was actually needed. And they had between 25 and 30% of their electricity shut off for 4 days. I know people in Texas that I talked to, they typically had power on at their house between 4 and 8 hours a day and off the rest of the day, and the temperatures in their house went down. There was a lot of problems. A lot of people died in some areas. A lot of homes were ruined. A lot of pipes broke. You can imagine what that was like. And so there was a lot of problems that they had that sort of led up to this. One is their market design of letting prices go that high. Second is they were really unprepared for very cold weather. The natural gas system froze off in a lot of ways. They're very dependent on renewable energy, which didn't really work very well during that period of time. They have limited interconnections with the rest of the world, so they had a lot of problems, and they all came home to roost in that 1 week. The thing, though, that we have to ask ourselves is, could that happen here, and what are we doing about it? Because nobody wants that to happen. And unfortunately, I'd have to say the answer is maybe. It's certainly less likely, but it's not impossible. We have better interconnections to the neighboring states and regions around here that would help diversify our supply during a broad problem like that, a bigger footprint. We have more diverse generating resources than they have in Texas. I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a minute. We had a little bit of a preview of this. I don't know if you remember back in 2014 and 15, we had some very cold days, polar vortexes as they're now called. And as a result of that, we got very close to having a similar problem here. And so there's been some changes that have been made. Companies have been required to provide on-site fuel backup so that natural gas isn't always available. When it gets really cold, guess what? People are using natural gas to heat their homes, and there isn't as much available for power generation. And we've become much more reliant on natural gas in recent years. But there is still a growing reliance on natural gas here, on wind and solar, and that increases our risk, particularly during the wintertime. We used to worry about the summertime. That's when we have the highest electric demands anywhere, is in the summer, most places. But in the winter is when we're most challenged, because natural gas, there isn't always enough to go around on those really cold days. This just shows kind of a breakdown of what the power supply is like in Texas on the left, and here in our region, which is called PJM, that's our grid operator here. And you can see that on the left-hand side there, wind and solar, the green and yellow, make up over a third of their electric supply in Texas on a regular day. They're very dependent on that. They have a lot of wind, they have a lot of sun. Whereas here in our part of the country, we don't have as much, and we're much less dependent. It's only a few percent. The blue part of the graph is natural gas, and you can see that both Texas and this part of the country get about half of our electricity from natural gas now. That's a big change from what it was recently. We still have more coal and more nuclear supply, the gray and the red parts, than they do down in Texas. And that's really what we depend on to keep the lights on through thick and thin, is those base load power supplies of coal and nuclear power. And those are both being challenged, both on a cost basis as well as on a environmental basis. And we've been through a lot of that in the past, and it looks like we're going to be facing more of that as we go into the next few years right now. This is a picture of our Cardinal Power Station. That's the largest generating station that we own as co-ops. It's over on the Ohio River, just south of Steubenville, Ohio. There are 3 600-megawatt coal-fired units there. They are some of the cleanest and most efficient coal-burning power plants anywhere in the world. They provide safe, reliable, cost-competitive, and environmentally responsible electricity every day to you all. We own 2 of the 3 units there. AEP owns the 3rd one. We've taken over operation of the station a few years ago, and we're operating it for the benefit of our electric co-ops as well as AEP right now. And it's a great place. There's a tour that we're going to be sponsoring. I think Midwest is going to be participating in that, so there'll be an opportunity to drive over there to Cardinal on September 15th. If you're interested, check with your Midwest staff members, and they can help you figure out how to do that. But there's only one problem that's left for our coal-fired power plant, and that it produces carbon when it makes electricity. Just like any fossil fuel, when you burn fossil fuels, you get carbon dioxide. Coal makes more than natural gas, but it's still that's become our big challenge going forward with that station. So let's talk a little bit about carbon dioxide emissions and what that means to us. I just want to share some facts with you. This graph shows on the top line the carbon dioxide emissions from the United States for over the last 15 years from burning fossil fuels. Every fossil fuel, when you drive your car, when you heat your home, everything we do, when you run your lawnmower, it produces some carbon dioxide. And it's gone down about 14% since 2005 in the United States. We're one of the leaders in the world in that. The world overall is still going up. We're down about 15%, 14% to be exact. And almost all of that has come from the electric power sector. The red line is how much comes from the electric power sector. We used to be the leading emitter of CO2 in the country. We're down 33% from where we were just in 2005. Two things have happened. One, we've converted a lot of coal plants to natural gas, which has brought lower, and we've added a lot of renewable generation, which has been good, but there's sort of a limit to how much intermittent generation from wind and solar you can have versus how much controllable generation you have from a fossil plant. So about 90% of the reduction has all come from the electric power sector. This just shows each of the major sectors. The red line is that same electric power. You can see how it's been going down year after year. The blue line is from transportation, from cars. You saw there's an electric car outside. That's going to be the way they reduce carbon dioxide from cars. Is we're going to have more electric cars, which guess what that means? So that means we need to produce more electricity to fuel them. And then the black line is sort of everything else. And you can see that really hasn't changed very much. That's home heating and businesses and other operations like that. So almost all of the decreases come from the electric power sector. But the answer to the other two is to do what? It's to electrify them. So we're going to take things that we use fuels for and we're going to put them on electricity, which is going to put more pressure on us. And the amount of electricity we produce, which is this red line, has stayed about the same since 2005. That you can see that's been very steady. We used to grow pretty steadily in electric power use in the country because of better lighting and other things and less industry. We've actually stayed about flat for about the last 20 years in electric power. Meanwhile, our carbon dioxide emissions have gone down considerably. So, you know, you're going to hear a lot probably over the next couple of years about who needs to do what to solve this problem. I just want you to know that your co-ops and the electric power system is doing a lot, and we want to make sure we do as much as we can without jeopardizing the reliability and affordability of your electric supply. And I think that's going to be a challenge over the next couple of years, and you might hear us talking about that some more. Is a lot of people have a lot of ideas about how to do things, but at the end of the day, we're responsible to make sure that the electric system works, and it doesn't work on aspirational goals. It works on principles of science and engineering, and that's what we're going to use to make sure we keep your electricity reliable. Last thing I'd just like to talk about is the fact that you all are members of an electric cooperative, and what we pride ourselves on is being community focused, that we have a responsible governance team. They're here in front of you today. They answer to your wishes. They stay well informed. The leadership of this co-op and other co-ops in Ohio participates in state and national meetings to make sure they're up on issues and events. You heard about it from Larry. The investment is local. They're putting money into their system every year to make sure you have a reliable electric system, and they invest both in their people and their facilities here to make sure that they can do what they do for you every day. They do return their capital. Part of your electric bill goes to invest in that system, and over time that's returned back through you through what they call patronage capital retirements, and you'll be getting those. You've been getting them every year from Midwest for many years now. Finally, you know, we're locally controlled, mission-driven, and forward-looking to try to make sure that we not only provide for what you need today, but well into the future. Like I said before, a lot of people have a lot of ideas about how to run electric systems. We've been doing it for a long time, and we're going to do our best to make sure that we keep it reliable and affordable for you every day going forward. So thanks for your time. Thanks for being here and participating today. And that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pat, for the power supply update. I'm sure our members will have some good questions. When I'm done here, we'll open it up for Q&A, and that's really one of the main reasons why we're here today, so I hope you take advantage of that time. Well, I'm going to take a little bit of a lighter approach. This year is the 85th anniversary for your electric cooperative, so I'm going to travel back in time a little bit to see how the culture and the DNA of Midwest Electric came to be and how it shapes your co-op today, and really the role that you play in this as well. History helps define our culture. You know, knowing our history helps us understand how we are to act, what our various responsibilities are. Just like knowing the history of a nation helps define your role as a citizen, knowing the history of Midwest Electric helps us define as employees and directors and members what our job is in those various capacities. And we have board minutes that go back to day one, so this has been that's been very helpful in this process. Now, the very first decision on that first night in 1936 had major implications. Do we create one single 5-county co-op or 5 separate 5 separate one-county co-ops or one single 5-county co-op. And the vote was unanimous that first night to stick together because they saw the advantages of the economies of scale as well as the benefits of collaboration. And our name on day one, you're going to like this, might want to write it down because it's got a catchy ring to it. Our name on day one was Farm Bureau Electric Co-op District Number 3 Incorporated. And we changed it, though, that first night to Western Farm Bureau Electric Co-op. The Ohio Farm Bureau was instrumental. We owe a lot of gratitude and thanks for that beginning. They were instrumental in getting us off the ground, and for a lot of co-ops in Ohio, the Farm Bureau played an active role in that beginning. They provided accounting, administrative, and engineering support to the co-ops. However, that DNA and culture would soon show itself. Only 7 months in, the board started to get a little frustrated with the lack of progress on getting electricity to all the people that had signed up for it. And some of the blame, a lot of the blame, was placed on the Farm Bureau. Not the Farm Bureau being the Farm Bureau, but just being a central location in Columbus. And this gets to the local community control aspect of electric cooperatives. We are built by the communities we serve, not by an office in Columbus. And this breakup also highlights our principle of autonomy and independence. Let the local community control the co-op. And it was a contentious issue. We actually have letters, some handwritten letters, some typed letters, between our board and the Mercer County Farm Bureau, where the Mercer County Farm Bureau was threatening that their local residents wouldn't sign up with the co-op if we left the Farm Bureau. But the board saw the greater benefit, again, of having a locally controlled community electric cooperative. And it would take a couple of years, though, for this split to go through, and in the meantime, the Hardin County part of the cooperative would split off to what is now Mid-Ohio Energy Cooperative in Kenton. And we allowed that willingly because it made sense for those members in Hardin County, and that, again, is part of our DNA of cooperation among cooperatives. Now, the emphasis on member ownership, was cast in stone early, as our first Code of Regulations in 1936 had language explaining that you, the member, have a responsibility to be informed and involved, and each local community is responsible for helping to improve the cooperative. And that first rule book also said the board and the co-op must be transparent with members. And all of these, member involvement, community focus, board governance, those remain central to who we are today. Our first office was in downtown Lima for more than a year. We had only 2 employees for the first year or so, Carl Prasar and Isabel Goodwin. No linemen for the first couple of years. That work was subcontracted to Heidecker Davis out of Spencerville. We moved to St. Mary's in 1937, then hired Thomas Kern as general manager in 38, and things started to get moving at that point. Glenwood St. Patrick Church, pictured here, they signed up as a member on June 1, 1936, but it would be more than a year before they actually got electricity. Today, they remain the longest continuous member still in that same name. And the first phase of our electric project was started with a $175,000 loan from the Rural Electrification Administration and covered 167 miles of power line to serve 414 customers. This hand drawing, this is actually from 1938. The area in red from St. Mary's to Fort Recovery, that was known as Project A. And the area in blue, that's Project B. That was southern Mercer County, and then up to Elida and Van Wert. And most of those that project was pretty much completed by November of 1938. Just one substation served our entire system at that time. Project C, which would come later, that would extend us further west to Wilshire and then also fill in parts of this. So the basic area of Midwest Electric is pictured right here, was set by 1940, and that runs from Fort Recovery over to Wapak, up to Wilshire, and then Elida and Delphus area. So that was set by 1940. But anybody here from like the Blue Lick, Bath Township area up to Columbus Grove, Rockport, so you're not on there. So let's see what happened with that group. This is a pretty interesting story. Here it's, I call it kind of like a Hollywood type of robber baron story, complete with the electric cooperative as the knight in shining armor coming to the rescue. That part circled in green, that was not originally a part of Midwest Electric. So again, that's Bath Township, Blue Lick, up to Rockport, Columbus Grove, Bluffton area. This was served by a company called General Utilities Company, which was owned by Associated Gas and Electric Company. And all of these and other companies throughout America, utilities like that, were owned by Howard Hobson, who's pictured here. Long story short, Hobson was eventually convicted of defrauding Americans of more than $20 million. That's $306 million in today's money, sentenced to prison. And this case led to the passing of the Public Utility Holding Company Act and a number of securities and exchange laws. Associated Gas and Electric filed for bankruptcy. We got pulled into this in about 1941 to start working on seeing what we can do to help out, and completed the purchase in 1942 for $47,307.08. We bought 104 miles of line serving 400 customers. And by making this purchase, it was then feasible for us to build an additional 296 miles of line in that area to serve additional people who still hadn't had electricity at that time in 1942. So there you have a pretty strong example of our concern for community, which again is part of that culture and DNA. And this was all happening, of course, around the time of America's involvement in World War II. Interestingly, an entry in our board minutes from December 12, 1941, says we were asked to place guards at substations on a 24-hour basis. There was no further explanation and no other entries following that, but most likely it was a result of the attack on Pearl Harbor a week earlier, is my only guess. We invested funds and surplus funds in war bonds. We gave out a book of U.S. defense stamps as an annual meeting prize. And the National Rural Electric Cooperative was formed in 1942, and its #1 listed goal was to coordinate the program for the winning of the war. Electric power increases farm production. So one thing that's really stuck out in my research is our early and significant commitment to marketing and member service, which again ties back to our culture and DNA of helping members beyond just selling a product, helping them to use that product more efficiently, more effectively, more productively. Our first electric rates already had a reference to load control for electric water heaters. As Larry mentioned, today our peak load management programs save the cooperative $600,000 a year in power supply costs. In less than a year, we started selling appliances to help members. We hired an electrician to help with internal wiring. We held appliance and cooking demonstrations, electric tours, helping farmers to see what electricity could do for them. All of these things we still do today in various but updated form. Things like energy audits, rebates for energy efficient appliances and heat pumps, working with builders and contractors to promote energy efficiency. Helping members is at the heart and soul of what an electric cooperative is all about. So I'm just going to scroll through a few photos as I start to wrap up the tour of our early years. This here is some cooking demonstrations. This is actually our current office, so this is, I guess, a little more recent, you could say. This is the mid-1960s. The photo on the left, that's our current office, mid-60s, probably a grand opening, and again, selling appliances. The photo on the right is our old office. Maybe a little social commentary off topic here. I like the way people used to dress for events like that. You compare it, maybe go to Walmart these days and see how people shop for appliances. It's a little bit different. So we've got a lot of good records. It's been very helpful in this. Our first lineman was a guy by the name of, at least as far as I could find, a guy by the name of Prentice Tomlinson. He was hired August 1st, 1938, 2 years after our start. And Mr. Tomlinson, later in his career, he would go to work for the City of St. Mary's Electric Department. They eventually named a substation after him. And speaking of our first substation, I mentioned that earlier about that serving the whole area. It's not pictured here, but it was built in 1937 on Clover Ford Road east of 66A, and it was just 300 kVA. Our second substation replaced that one, had a capacity of 600 kVA, and that one substation served that entire system, 850 miles of line at the time. Now, for perspective, 600 kVA may be about the size of one of Mercer County's average poultry farms. So that one substation served everything. But keep in mind, REA surveys, co-op surveys back at the time, showed that a radio was the number one thing that people wanted when they got electricity. So they weren't really using a whole lot yet. And the average bill was just $4.68 per month. You'd probably like that, wouldn't you? More than the $450 a day that. So another part of our early culture and DNA is about board governance. So listen to this entry in the August 1939 board minutes. And keep in mind, these are people, they'd never had electricity, so they didn't really know much about it, but yet they were trying to run an electric company. So this is from the board minutes. A general discussion was had of our duties in the conduct of the office which we have been chosen by the people to fulfill. We discussed our various faults and mistakes freely and frankly, that we emerge with a better understanding, a more appreciative conception of the obligations which we owe to each other and to all persons whom we may be obliged to serve. And then they voted in to bring in some outside experts to help them with guidance. So talk about humility. And today, your board reviews a governance best practices topic every month. So culture and DNA, that's what I'm talking about here. Cooperation among cooperatives. This is perhaps our most critical principle. When I say we cannot survive without this, that may be a stretch. I'm sure we could find a way to survive, but it would be a whole lot more difficult, and you would probably notice it. In the early years, we visited other electric cooperatives for information exchange and best practices. In the late 1930s, even before the statewide organization was formed in 1941, in the late 1930s, training classes were put together for Ohio co-op employees. The various co-ops worked together to do training. We worked together in the 1930s with other co-ops to lobby changes to state taxation laws. And then by 1941, an official Ohio statewide organization was formed in the national organization in 1942. Today, so much of our success depends on this principle of cooperation among cooperatives, including areas such as power supply. For us to try to do that on our own, wouldn't even want to think about that. Communications, legislative advocacy, safety, employee and director training, group purchasing, computer and IT systems, after-hours dispatching, and so much more we do with other cooperatives working together. By 1942, we were off and running. Our total utility plant was valued at $739,000. Today it's about $60 million. But it was paid for almost exclusively with debt. We only had about 7% equity. And today, as Larry mentioned, we're at 49, 50%, which is considered the sweet spot for minimizing the cost of capital, but still providing flexibility. Total sales in 1942 was $111,000 compared to $30 million today. And we made money. We had a net profit of $14,769. So we were starting to build that equity, which eventually gets returned to members in your patronage cash back. In late 1942, the board voted to give a 50% refund of November billing as like a Christmas present. Now, this technically was not patronage equity from what I could tell in the research. The co-op had not started allocating or paying back patronage at that time yet, but it set the stage for another cornerstone of our DNA, members' economic participation. You share in the profits, you have equity ownership, and since our beginning, we have paid back $36 million to our member owners like you. Well, that is it for our trip down memory lane to the birth and toddler years of Midwest Electric. I hope this has given you a greater sense of meaning and purpose as a member owner of your electric cooperative. Like that first board said in the first code of regulations, you, the member, have a serious responsibility to be informed and involved. So, thank you. So at this time, we're going to open the floor to questions. Okay, Maddie. Kevin in blue has mic number 5. Paul in the white has mic number 6. Okay, we didn't wait 2 years for you to just sit there. So, yep, sometimes I
Hi,
should ask
you
that.
mentioned some new threats to rural cooperatives. Could you expand on maybe what the new threats are approaching? Thank you.
Sure. And, now, are you referring to anything Pat said, or?
I'm assuming you're referring to the new legislation maybe, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, like the environmental regulate, as far as, yeah, so if that's what you're referring to, the threats there would have to do with, I'll just say, I'm not meaning this to sound, political, but anti-carbon legislation, being that, as Pat mentioned, carbon-based generation like coal is essential for baseload generation, as opposed to the non-dispatchable forms of generation. And even, natural gas, even though it is a cleaner fuel, it's not a fuel that can be stored on site. And so it has to be transported, whereas the coal can be stored on site, and then that natural gas delivery created issues in Texas and has the potential to create issues here as well. So that probably the biggest threat would be the anti-coal legislation that we're likely to see, or regulations. And again, it gets to affordability, reliability, availability. Environmentally, at Cardinal, we've invested more than, is it $2 billion? $1 billion. More than $1 billion in recent years to make Cardinal truly one of the cleanest power plants in the world. And I would encourage you, September 15th, anyone to consider going on that tour, just to see how all the work that we've put into it. But that's probably one of the biggest threats would be the legislation that could impact the availability of electricity. We don't want to go down the same route of California. Pat didn't get into this, but last summer California had blackouts for similar reasons. It's because of energy policy is what's caused the blackouts, and that's what we want to try to avoid.
In regards to the hacking that's coming in from the foreign countries, especially Russia, they've hacked in, with our power supply, gas, and also the meat packing plants. I was wondering, what the electric companies are going to keep us from safety from getting hacked with the power grids. They could create a lot of havoc with that.
Yeah, good question. I'll address it from the distribution end. Pat, do you mind saying anything on the general? Okay. So on the Midwest, again, Buckeye Power provides the generation, then we purchase, I'll say, the transmission from the AEPs and DP&Ls of the world, and then we provide the distribution from the substation to your home. On the distribution end, the vast majority of our system is mechanical. So as far as being hacked, it's limited there. Although we are getting into some automation with distribution automation, and so that is an issue that we're keeping at front of mind. So we work with a company that helps to make sure we've got the latest and greatest as far as the firewalls and everything that's needed there. But we have to rely on the industry experts there. We don't spare any expense. I'll say that. If the experts and all the guidance is you need to do this in order to be cyber secure, we do it. So that's on the distribution end. And then Pat, if you want to talk about generation.
So there are lots of requirements as an industry that we have for cybersecurity protection that we've had for several years. People have realized it's a vulnerability that we need to be worried about. But I'll tell you, I don't think any of these companies thought they weren't doing enough or thought that was going to happen to them until it did. One of the things that we have that really helps us as an electric system is that we are diverse. There's a lot of different companies like Midwest and others that have their own systems, so they're not all networked together completely. At our power stations, we actually have to have our control systems completely off of the internet. So we don't have any direct connections to the outside world at our power plants to prevent them from individually being controlled from outside. But we do have these large grid operators that operate across the country in various regions, and they take it very seriously. I know they have very advanced teams. They spend a lot of money on it, but that's probably the thing that I worry about most is that the central controls that we all rely on to coordinate our activities is a target, and I know they know that, and they're working hard at it. But it's going to continue to be a challenge for some time to come, I believe.
Okay, thanks. Good question.
When we talk about renewables, we're talking about things that are, I believe, heavily subsidized by the federal government. If those subsidies are taken away from those renewables, then those costs are going to go substantially higher, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm going to hand over to Pat again. He's the expert on the power supply.
Yes, when we talk about subsidized renewables, you're really talking about wind and solar. Right now, they enjoy federal tax subsidies that account for about a third of the cost of a new installation. So about 30% is subsidized through direct federal tax credits. Interestingly, co-ops are not able to take advantage of those directly. We have to work through a third party that's a tax, since we're tax exempt, to be able to take advantage of that. That's something we're working on fixing. But yes, if those go away, the costs go up about 30% for new installations, so you'll see less of them. Although right now it looks like those subsidies are going to be extended probably for as much as another 10 years right now. So I think those are, like a lot of government programs, become here to stay and are really hard to kill off. And so I think right now it's most likely they'll continue for several more years, and they are about 30% of the initial cost of those facilities comes through a direct federal subsidy.
Good questions. Well,
Got one here, Matt.
okay.
Matt, I'm just wondering why I'm having such a fluctuation in electric at my house. Last night it blinked out, right back on again, and it happens very often. And I mean, that can't be good for your refrigerators that are running, your air conditioners that are running, and things like that. It wasn't out enough to, I got battery backup on my TV and stuff, so it didn't go out, but it just blink, and it's back on again. So
Okay.
I think I'd rather see it blink out for 3 or 4 minutes than blink out and right back on compressors that are running.
Yep. Okay. Well, I can only give you a general answer, but before you leave, Paul, if you want to make sure you guys touch base, and then we can specifically look at your location. But in general, it could be anything from a tree branch and just momentarily making contact with the power line. Then that starts to activate some of our equipment oil circuit reclosure that may go through a cycle before it would actually kick out. And so that's an indication. It's frustrating, but that's an indication that the system is actually working as designed. So when there's a temporary fault on the line, like maybe it's an animal or a tree branch or something that makes momentary contact, if we didn't have some of that equipment out there, it would actually cause a complete outage, and you'd be out of power for whatever it might be, 2 or 3 hours before we come out, and we'd come out and there's nothing there because the tree branch already just kind of removed itself, blowing in the wind. So it's annoying, but it helps to prevent longer outages. But as far as specifically, we'll just make sure that you talk to Paul before you leave, and we can get your location and then look up to see. It could be loose connections somewhere, but. Yep. Yeah. Whereabouts are you? Where are you located? Okay. Yeah, we'll just make sure you talk to us afterwards, and we'll get your address and all that.
Yeah, last Friday lost the power for about an hour and a half due to the storm, and you guys did a great job and got the power on in short order. Your great linemen also do volunteer their time on mission trips. You want to talk briefly about that?
Sure, yeah, Project Ohio, that's about every other year project that linemen from throughout Ohio will go to. It's been Guatemala where we go to. I talked about extending or building electric service here in west central Ohio in the 1930s and 40s. Well, there are some parts of the country that still don't have it. And that's what Project Ohio has been in some really impoverished areas of Guatemala. And we've had linemen go in the past, and throughout Ohio, linemen will go to that, and I'm sure we'll have another project coming up here in another year or two. And then, when they come back from that, it's very rewarding for those linemen too to see, when you can bring electricity to someone. Just think about how much it does for you on a daily basis, and what it does as far as opportunity and economy. So it's a great thing that hopefully just continues to help those people long term. Okay.
Are you guys looking at any new technology to give real-time information on energy usage to the members? I know AEP has real-time where you can actually see what your house is using versus waiting a day in the Smart Hub app.
Yeah, I don't know of any updates as far as the timing of it, but we do have, it sounds like you already have some knowledge there. You can access your own information of daily electric use, hourly electric use. But as far as the timing of when that information is available, I'm not aware of any updates there. But we kind of, back to the cooperation among cooperatives, that system, our billing system, it's sort of a national cooperative. We're in a program there with a whole bunch of co-ops, because it would just be onerous for us to try to do all that by ourselves. So we kind of wait for their technologies to come out. But I'm sure it's going to go in that direction. It just keeps going and going in that direction. We've got the metering technology. So. Yep.
Oh, okay. Hello. So I have a question with regards to the efficiency of the electrical grid. And I learned about this recently in school, but I know that the grid it sometimes loses energy produced through variety of things, including power lines and stuff. And I was wondering if we were doing anything to try and optimize the electrical grid so that not as much fuel has to be used to produce the same output and energy provided to homes.
Yeah, good question. So what you might be referring to there is, we call it line loss, and that is basically the difference between what we buy from Buckeye Power to what we sell to you, the end consumer. And line loss averages about 5%. And that's about an industry average. In the early days, I found it was about 27%. So right off the bat, they're losing 27%. But a lot of that has to do with the distance that it has to go. That one substation was serving everything, so there would be a lot of losses along those lines. We do, on our end, things like tree trimming would help with that. Theft on the part of customers could cause line loss. It's not being paid for. And we have a very good customer base, so that our bad debt numbers are very low. But as far as other technology changes, there's always, at least with current technology, there's always going to be an element of losses. Just the heat that's generated within the equipment, like transformers, that's a big contributor to losses as well. The industry as a whole, though, I'm not aware of. I don't know, Paul, if you know of any technology that's being investigated that addresses losses.
One thing that Midwest is working on a project that we're starting to work on is looking at our losses and then trying to analyze through the AMI data or the metering data, if we have areas that have higher losses than others, and then also work on installing capacitor banks that we could switch on and off. Matt talked about some of the automation that we're working on, so that's kind of the next step in our automation. Right now our automation is more on restoring power, trying to reduce blinking lights. The next step in our automation would be installing capacitor banks. which would help to reduce the losses. Again, when we talk about reducing losses, though, it's going more like from 5% to 4.8%, not 5% to 2%. But that's projects that we're working on to try to reduce losses.
Good question. Got one?
Okay. I'd like to thank Matt. A couple months back, you had a letter to the editor in the Lima News, and it was nice educating us on what was the difference between renewable and reliable. And definitely a lot more people need to understand that, especially with our laws and rules that are coming down from our federal government. The other thing I wanted to know was the problem that was happening in the state. The one guy was trying to skim off money for nuclear generation to try to keep our plants. I've also noticed too that here in the United States that I could be wrong, but are there any new plants of any kind going up here in the United States? You'll see other countries, and especially China and all these, they don't care about the carbon footprint, but they certainly care about their new, electric generation and willing to spend a lot of money putting up new generation. My question is what is going to happen in the future here in the United States? Will there be any kind of new generation? And will any of that involve nuclear power? Because it's been tested, tried and true for a number of years. So, and least amount of carbon footprint. If we're going to spend money on renewables like solar and wind power, why can't we spend money on, let's say, state-of-the-art nuclear power?
Well, currently there's no new nuclear or coal being built, correct? Minimal. Some natural gas. But as far as in the future where that goes, a lot of that's going to depend on legislation and regulations that come out, and that's one reason why I want to continue to encourage you to be involved in our political action program. It's been successful in the past. There was a program years ago that we helped to stop the cap and trade program. So you know, we asked you to continue to be involved in those programs to help make sure we get reliable power plants supported. Yep.
Gentlemen, I wanted to let you know that I appreciate all the hard work that you do, not only the board, but the linemen. My question is, it seems like we're leaving internal combustion engines to hybrids to fully electric vehicles. And I read with interest the story in Midwest Electric this month about the trip the gentleman took. Do you foresee our grid system being able to handle the new electrical vehicles that are coming online?
Well, it is going to be a challenge. My take is that it's going to happen gradually. So I think there'll be time to adapt. It's going to be a challenge everywhere from the generation down to the distribution end. From the generation end, the challenge is avoiding situations like Texas and California. If we go so far into the non-dispatchable, non-reliable forms of generation, yeah, that's going to hurt everyone, not just electric vehicles. Then on the distribution end, the electric vehicles have a very high demand. Depending on the charger that you have at your location, it could be anywhere from 10 to 20 kW of a charging, which for reference, you know, your water heater is going to be, you know, 4 kW or less. So you're looking at doubling, tripling, quadrupling an electric water heater, and those are typically going to be charged during peak hours. So it's going to be challenging from that supply standpoint, and then from the cost standpoint is how do we make this cost effective where other members aren't kind of paying for these spikes in demands that some people might be causing. So we're looking at things like with our metering technology, we're looking at things like time of use rates. You know, so that's something that may be coming out in the future too. Sounds good. Thank you. Looks like we got a question in the middle there. And I think we have to start. Might want to start wrapping up here. These are good, so I don't want to squash it.
My question is actually going to fall under, how much extra power can the current generators create if we're going to push towards all these hybrids and electric vehicles? Are we going to have to put more generation systems in? And then it's going to fall under, what kind of generation systems can we put in?
Yes, more generation will be needed. As far as what kind of generation, that's going to depend on the legislation and the regulations that what they allow us to build.
So with that though, a lot of electric cars actually charge at night, so it's actually stabilizing a little bit on the grid. I know mine charges at night, so when it's not being used, it's actually making things more efficient across the grid. Now during the day, if you're charging, that's a different story.
Yep, that's true, good point. All right, well, I think with that, we're going to hand it over to Courtney Burton and finish up the business here. Thank you.
All right, good morning. I have the election results, and the board decided to have the vote on the board decided to have the vote on member matters by mail this year, as we have recently in the past, and there were two things that you all voted on. One was whether to amend the Code of Regulations, and the other was you voted on the directors. So for the Code of Regulations, that passed, and it was successful, so the code will be amended. We amended it to say that related parties can't be on the board and felons, and then also that we can have member meetings solely by electronic means in the future if we ever have another pandemic again. And then on the trustees or the directors, all three people who ran were unopposed. We had District 2, Auglaize County, District 3, Van Wert County, and District 4, Mercer and Darke counties. And Bob Barnt was re-elected for Auglaize County, Roger Rank for Van Wert County, and Gary Kanapke for Mercer and Darke County. So those are the election results, and now we just need to reinstall our three directors. So I just need those three gentlemen to come on up. Guys, you're standing behind me. Can you come over here? Please raise your right hands. Will you pledge to provide the members with energy and related services of the highest and most dependable quality at the lowest cost consistent with sound business principles? If so, please answer, I will. Do you pledge to support the policies of the cooperative and to understand and apply the cooperative principles to the best of your ability? If so, please answer, I will. Will you pledge to follow the laws of the state of Ohio and of the United States in carrying out your duties as a director on Midwest Electric Inc.'s behalf? If so, please answer, I will. Lastly, the cooperative has a history of being a good corporate citizen in its community, and to the extent possible, consistent with the cooperative's core mission to seek improvement in the areas of economic, social, educational, and environmental development. Will you pledge to give due consideration to these concerns? If so, please answer, I will. Congratulations, you've been reinstalled as directors of Midwest. Let's give them all a round of applause. Thank you.
All right, well, this comes to the end of the meeting here. I know someone mentioned about nuclear, and as directors, we do travel different meetings. They offer all around the nation and state, and from these meetings, we do try to keep abreast of what's happening, what's out there. And I found one information kind of interesting. And nuclear has really, it's too bad it's taken a bad rap, because I think possibly it's still the most safest. There's no CO2 given off or anything like that. But you know, one professional there talked about the study that a company did, and we all go in for radiation or x-rays or whatever. Just to give you an idea, the amount of x-ray that you may have done, they went out and went to a beach and check the irradiation off of a beach. And there is more radiation on the natural sand and beach than a person gets from a radiation treatment or to have an x-ray done. It was just an information, those type of things that, sometimes people get the negative and gets a bad rap, and nuclear's they're a very expensive plant, but if you want, and Pat, you can tell me if I'm right, if you want no CO2 emissions, those things don't emit it. But yet, they're closing the plants down. I know in New York, they closed a plant down that supplies what they're told 25% of New York's electricity. Now that electricity's got to come from somewhere else, and they're relying on green energy, those type of things. So these types of things that the directors and Pat and the state and everybody that's involved are concerned about, and I want to reiterate the importance of members being involved, and through the COPA or the action committees, that if you're not involved, get involved, because that's the only way that we can have a strong force to fight or eliminate some of these things that comes down and regulates us. And once they're regulated, sometimes it's pretty hard to remove them, and then we got to live by it. And so I encourage members, and especially people that are home watching this live or watching this later, please get involved in that, because it takes money to help fight these things, and that's our avenue of fighting and standing up for what we think does give supply to keep our lights on at a reasonable and reliable rate on that. So anyways, that's just my two bits. It's just interesting, those type of things that we go and we spend time doing it, and we learn something every time we go to these type of meetings. So anyways, we are coming to the end of this our meeting here. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? All right, so moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carried. And at this time, this ends our annual meeting here, and I will ask Kevin, Terry, and Paul to come forward. They will handle the awards and door prizes.
Awards to give out. We have one award for a college student or someone either entering college or is currently completing a post-high school education of some sort. So there were 6 or 7 names in that. So we'll draw that first. Then we have dollars to give away in the squirrel cage here. That's about $2,000 to hand out to you members that attended today. And then we have a tool bag here that one of our vendors contribute. We'll draw that after that, and then we have these 3 flowered plants or planters up here, and we'll draw those as well. So please stick around for any of that, and we'll get it started. Is there Claire Putoff? Come on down, Claire. She's attending Bowling Green State University, and it says her father's name's Ronald Putoff. Congratulations. So, we'll get a picture of you real quick to put in the country living, if that's okay. All right. Maybe up on stage would be a good backdrop. Yeah, this is Claire. This is our photographer. Do you want to have her with the backdrop on the blue? Okay. What are you studying, Claire? I'll just say communications. Clear. Good, Matt, would you help or to draw? Just draw them out, hand up. All right, the first envelope is $500 for the lucky winner. Norbert Albers. The next draws are for $100 each. Ronald Wilker. Mr. Wilker? He left. Let him know. Catherine Schloeder? Schloeder? Schluter. Joseph Wenning. Also $100, Larry Schwinnen. Larry Schwinnen. Also $100, Diana Fisher. Ms. Fisher? Dalton Heck. Dalton Heck. Bronwyn Leonardi. Another $100. Donald Henchen. Larry Bowers. Also $100. Stephen Koenig. Up in the top. Over the top there, Paul. $100, Donald Kramer. Donald Kramer. Michael Beaning, way at the top. Also $100, Harold Van Horn. Over here, Paul, second row. $100, Luana Scott. Lucky area over there. Oh, we'll drop them in half. We're at $50 now. Marilyn Seibert. $50, David Hayes. $50, Chad Hannon. Chad Hannon. $50, Mary Kay Rammel. John Seitz, way in the corner. Get some exercise, Joel. Right? George Hengsler. George Hengsler. Ah. Craig Schlater. Up there as well. Lucky spot. Got a write-in one here. Ken Strickland. Mr. Strickland in the center there. I think we're okay. It's hard to beat that. Pat Crendel. Oh, top left. Top left, Joel. Sounds familiar. Richard Kreitz. Did I say that one before? What are we down to? Is this last one? The last in cash goes to Joseph Yall. Now the tool bag here is a Husky tool bag, and it's got some miscellaneous tools in. The bag's quite nice, actually. Wayne Howe. We'll just start from this and work that way with the plants. Go ahead. This plant here, it's a business. We can't do that. Try another. Jim Link. There you go, Jim. The middle plant, James Fowler. James Fowler. There you are. Last plant, Virgil Dews. Virgil? I see ya. Thanks for coming, everybody. I hope you had a good time and learned what you could. Thanks for coming.